January 18th, 2022. There is a piece on this morning on Channel 2. I don't know if they show it, but this is a woman that when she comes in through teleportation device, she refers to herself as Elizabeth Warren. From my couch potato position, having children who need to know things about their protection, their government, their future, some direction, which is hard to come by these days. It's like losing your human GPS. It's frightening. This is all I have to go on at the moment, since the schools in the New York area have not taught nearly as much as what she says in this one clip. And they say things like, now I know they're in a different educational bracket than I am. They just absolutely are. They have this word they use called a Gallup poll. Now, I could imagine and fathom at one point in a rural area, RURAL, that somebody might be on a horse and go town to town and collect some form of ballot or some form of decree or disseminate some form of information in a, like, say, old Western type situation. Being I'm in more metropolitan, it's still the same amount of effort. Horses obviously being optional, but once the telephone and the telegraph and the teleportation device came in and sped up the transmission of communication, it just feels like the message somehow, they know what a Gallup poll is. They know what it means. They know how one. My guess would be it's some kind of survey. How it's put together, by whom, what it's for, how to participate in one, I would have no idea. Again, Family Feud, a game show, used to say they surveyed 100 people, and I used to ask Judy, I'm like, how do they survey? Like, how do they pick just 100 people? And like, who are these people? And how did they get picked for this thing? For the answers on the board before they started spinning the things. Those were my kiddo questions when I was like my son's age. Now, but never got answers to. So when they speak, and she's, I believe, a Democrat, but again, to learn this two-party, I mean, it's a dance between the Democrats and the Republicans to keep a solid footing. It feels like, as a couch potato, that's my interpretation of it, because I don't actually have the doctorate or the whatever, but from a couch potato position, when I look, I don't hate Democrats, I don't hate Republicans. There's not this, like, I know some people go to war over I've just tried an independent. In fact, when I went to Canada and they did personality assessments, I got put in a group that was the I, and I had a D, like, that was trailing me. It was like a small D, but I was an I in that setting. That's how the professional grouped us at some point. So I know these pieces of information are pertinent. But this is all we have to go off of. Now, she's an incredible speaker, but I don't get to see her on her, whatever she does for a living. Like, after she leaves this television spot, I have no idea what her career could even look like. Does she go out and speak at colleges? Does she go straight back to Washington and sit in some office? And just attend meetings, and we have no idea. The people at couch potato level and as kiddos were never told what a career looked like. As family members, we were not introduced, even in the fitness whatever that we passed as kiddos, we were not taught about any form of government per se or the words of them from second grade to sixth grade. There was not even a word about anything government. They were in the middle of a war, so there was current events when we had to listen to the news, the teleportation news, nightly news, and make like a report or newspaper clippings. They said there was war going on, but again, we weren't taught what war meant either. We knew a lot of people got hurt or died and sacrificed. There were weapons involved, but that was really it. The rest of it, geography and stuff, very confusing. It was not laid out clearly as a learning and teaching device as we were in our early education of school.
Shark for that one.
I think it still makes you smile.
It does make you smile.
I'll take it.
All right, but I want to take it because I'm going to get right to our guests. As you can see, we begin this hour with Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is here to talk about the battle in the Senate over voting rights legislation. It's set to resume today. Her fellow Democrats.
And that's the thing. Like, there are these arguments and conversations going on that my son's homesick today, we're totally left out of. I don't know how to get not even into a conversation if I'm not allowed to be in the conversation, but to even just know what's going on or what the topics are, because they say these key-op words of what they're whatever, which I understand, but I don't really understand is the thing. I mean, as a human, I could jump to a conclusion, but it might not be the right one. And sometimes where the other humans in my arm's length, like I can reach them, Lynn and Lou, those are my only two humans that I have close since birth, it gets really confusing sometimes how they interpret certain information. And then I'm like, wait, but I'm not on an inside track, but that's not what it seemed like for teleportation. So when they speak of voting rights, she mentioned something about they have to vote so this way we can hold everybody accountable. That was her argument within a conversation that I've never been brought into or a part of, being at couch potato level of high school graduated, and with a Regents of some sort and an AP even in high school, but again, it's whatever.
That would be Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema oppose a change in Senate rules that would let this measure pass with just 51 votes instead of 60. Without that change, the bill is not going to get anywhere in an evenly split Senate. It is just the latest setback for President Biden's agenda as he approaches 1 year in office with...
And when they say these things, House, Senate, Congress, it really is confusing. I mean, I'm at age 43, and if I'm really honest with myself in this, I'm looking at myself while I'm speaking to make a record of how just lost I am in this society and culture and time frame. I have no idea. I don't know what they do. I don't know how they got the job. I don't know what their job looks like. I don't know their importance. I don't know what the fight is over. I don't know what the conversation is over. I don't know why I'm so caught out unprepared. But they use Gallup poll. I don't have a clear definition. They use Senate. Now, here's the thing. I see senators on here, they look one way. I have something sitting in the neighborhood calling itself a senator that is not of genealogy and familial to anything that I could reach out to. It's something completely different. Not to say that there's not friendly whatever, but I have no idea. I have nobody to protect myself with on if it's true or not.
With just a 44% approval rating in the latest CBS poll. So, Senator Warren, good morning to you.
Thank you.
Do we have that right? This voting rights legislation, which is going to be debated today, it is effectively dead. In fact, it is dead without your Democratic colleagues coming to the table.
Look, I am not declaring this bill dead because we can't. It is absolutely too important. Understand it this way. Voting is foundational. That is the whole premise of our democracy. And before we get to the procedural part, keep this in mind, that state legislatures all around the country that are controlled by Republicans are doing everything they can to keep people from voting. Who are they trying to keep from voting? Black people, brown people, college students, people who live on tribal reservations, trying to keep those folks from voting because they might vote Democratic.
But voting on what is my question? I mean, are we talking war debt that covered everyone and doesn't need certain people voting? Because if you had a vote to not pay for a war or a piece of a war that was fought elsewhere to protect you, to make sure it didn't get into your lands, again, it becomes this wobbly argument that is a conversation that I don't even know who's brought into it, quite frankly, to discern it. I mean, if there are people who are actually in the know and there is a subset and they are saying it was whatever, that's one thing. But there's just such a lack of communication on my part, and it is frightening to be so blinded and deaf. If like almost the Helen Keller piece of how did we get here? Like, what did I miss? Where was if we were driving, where was the exit ramp? Like, how did I lose the directions?
Single senator who is a Republican in the United States Senate has said they're not going to do anything. They're letting the states do whatever they want.
But you would not need them if Senator Sinema of Arizona and Manchin agreed to a rule change that allowed Democrats to vote on a simple majority. Senator Sinema says she's not doing it because it would deepen partisanship in this country. She calls it a disease. Does she have a point?
Look, we have partisanship in this country, and that's true. And there's a lot of fighting, and I get it. We fight over child.
Partisanship. Another word that is not, I mean, I understand this is your part, this is your part, this is your part, this is how your people behaved, this is how your people acted, this is what they acted on, this is what's due, this is what was promised. If that's what partisan is, I understand. Where it gets murky or mucky or confusing is when they make it, they say the word partisan and then they throw in bipartisan. And again, the distinction for couch potato is really unclear what that means. And then they throw in key-op words like child tax credit. I wasn't in on the conversation, so when you say this to a couch potato, and then you throw in, well, that's the partisan or that's the bipartisan viewpoint. Right. But then, I mean, like there was no foundational vocabulary or vernacular built as a child or even a teenager or adult. So and I don't know when they threw out the morsels of construction in order to build that construct foundation to then be part of the conversation. I don't know if it was only passed to a few. Again, this very unclear.
child care. I believe we ought to have universal child care. I understand. There are Republicans who say no.
Again, at a couch potato level, I don't even know what that conversation means. I don't know what was in it. I don't know what was carried forward, if anything was dropped off. I've never been part of that conversation.
No, we should not invest federal dollars in that. I get that fight, but this is about our democracy. That's the whole premise of how we have a government, is consent of the governed. And that means that every American citizen has right to vote and a right to get that vote counted. Here's the thing.
But that goes back to consent of those that are governed. Then why is there so much influx of new pieces that don't want to be governed? Why would they be introducing pieces of instability when it was already difficult to manage before, and then all of a sudden this rush comes in and then makes it all, the conversation all the more harder to whatever. It becomes really confusing.
Thing. All 50 Democrats, all 50, have agreed to the Voting Rights Protection Bill. Mm-hmm. We're just hung on this procedure that effectively gives Mitch McConnell a veto. And, you know, the thing about that procedure is it's keeping us from doing a lot of things Americans want that are popular across this country. They want to see us do immigration reform. They want to see us do Roe versus Wade.
But after a while, Senator, people don't even hear you now. It just seems like a lot of screaming and hollering and I mean, Senator Sinema.
And then there's the don't want to be governed people that have come into this conversation that make the job of building infrastructure and whatnot that much more difficult, because there's some, I keep getting some not necessarily from her, but some underlying issues with anger across the board, even though some have reached pinnacles I couldn't even dream of. I mean, they're living lifestyles like kings. But yet they're making life and they're pulling apart the seams of what was holding the rest of us and the ability to have a government in place. That's really scary. The fact that I don't see clearing out of the scary problematic voter, non-voter. It's not all, but it's a growing number and a growing problem of making things more difficult to communicate about and more confusing and more unstable. I mean, the problem just seems to be getting worse.
And Senator Manchin are also making it difficult for the Build Back Better plan.
Yeah.
So how do you move past this roadblock? I know you all are very optimistic and say you can't give up hope, but after a while, when does reality set in and say we need...
And what I don't understand is how so many educated people got pulled into a conversation that started just in one allowance, and why I was blocked from somehow along the 43 years, whether the tsunami came over my head and just pulled me under the water and just keeps beating me across the coral reef, pulled in some undertow that I'm trying to like get up for air. It's confusing why there's so many people who are educated, almost like mini lawyers, in the conversation, almost discrediting every step you take as a Democrat or a Republican. There's all of these other alternate, now free speechers, with public teleportation and big couch potato ability to persuade or to throw more confusion and slow down the conversation to almost derail the train completely. while building something else entirely different and scary. Because nobody's talking about it in actuality on anything I've ever heard of.
Need to go in a different direction.
Okay, so look, let's do a little reality. Where
Okay.
were we a year ago today? We were still mopping up blood and sweeping up glass in the United States Capitol. We had
Yes.
an armed insurrection.
Yes.
Remember, people couldn't even get in line to try to get vaccines. We have now dealt with that. Vaccines are available everywhere. Boosters are available everywhere. By the way, get your vaccine and booster if you
Yes.
haven't. They work. But we also passed a rescue package. It's why schools are open. It's why our economy that everyone predicted was going to take a nosedive didn't. In fact, in President Biden's first year, more new jobs have been created than any president in history. So we've gotten our act together to do some things.
That's
We
not
just
the
don't
headline.
like
That's not the
word.
headline. But can we go back to the Build Back Better bill
Of
for
course.
just a second? Would it be better to break it up at this point so that
Why is it Build Back Better? Why is it so damaged?
you get something accomplished?
I don't want to negotiate against myself here because, of course,
And then it seems like now people are calling for answers and results and getting really loud on that forefront, with some underseething anger that's going on somewhere, and putting real danger on stability.
of course, we love all the parts to it, but we need to get something accomplished.
Yeah.
And
Child
we
tax
need to
credit,
get
perhaps?
everybody on absolutely the child
Can you
tax
peel that
credit
off?
and universal child care. We need to get those accomplished. We need to get those through.
Right, but peel them off to pass them individually so
Pass
they can get
them.
through.
That's right, but remember, we're back to the filibuster problem.
But you're open to breaking it up.
And again, there's another word. There's a vocabulary, a vernacular word, I don't know which one. Filibuster. I've heard it throughout my life. But I don't really have a clear definition on it. What I've been able to just in a wiffle ball with holes in it with my fingers through it, holding on to like quietly, just to myself, because I don't talk about politics or religion with anybody. I'm just like, right, so that's just where they keep talking, but they talk in order to negate one another, confuse one another, and then secretly move in instability factors so nothing gets accomplished. And then they argue over just how ineffective each other are to try to destroy even faster. Is that correct? Because that's kind of what it feels like.
I'm open to whatever's going to get us across the finish line, knowing we're not going to get one single Republican to lower the price of prescription drugs, not one to give us universal child care, not one who's going to say that these corporations that make billions in profits are going to not get away any longer with paying zero in taxes. We've got all those in Build Back Better. We just need to get what we can across the finish line.
In 2024, should Manchin and Sinema be primary?
We'll adjourn.
And right in where she says about the Republicans are not giving these things, that then gets confusing at times. Not going to go into that, but just for a highlight feature, that may be a point to build back better on. Since at couch potato level, it's a little confusing.
Address that when we get past this week.
Okay, let me ask you about 2024. Do you believe that President Biden is up for the job?
President Biden's running for re-election. I expect to support him.
His approval ratings are some of the lowest that they've been for a very long time.
I understand that, but remember, we've just finished.
Now, is that
the
a
first
naysayer?
quarter. We're just starting into the second quarter here. So
Rebel
we've got a lot
rouser,
of time,
perhaps?
A lot of work in front of us.
Oh, but you only have probably less than a year
Yes.
before you lose both the Senate and the House.
Just particular, by the way, to this conversation, because that's what's happening at this particular table.
A preference nationally for Republicans at a 5-point margin over Democrats. You started the year with the insurrection and a 9-point advantage.
No, I know.
In the fourth quarter, it was a 5-point advantage to the Republicans. So something's not right here. Something that you think it could change the game for President Biden is, with a stroke of a pen, he could cancel student loan debt federally.
Yes.
Why do you think that would make such a difference?
Because it would affect about 43 million Americans. And keep in mind, for the people who are dealing with student loan debt, about 40% of them do not have college diplomas. These are people who did what we wanted to do as Americans. They tried, but they had babies, they were working 3 jobs, they moved, and they didn't make it. So now they're dealing with student loan debt on what a high school grad makes. Also, think about the racial implications of what we're talking about. We talk about the...
I get that, where she actually adds me into the conversation. I don't know if she's my spokesperson for it in some quiet conversation. I'm really not clear. But then it goes into, like, what did it cost for her to get on this morning? And the mention of somebody else's movement or agenda seems to take precedence, because now here's a false narrative that comes through, which I hear all the time. And I don't know if it's because the teleportation network is now under siege and taken over by some other bet, B-E-T, instead of alphabet. And now it becomes difficult to address you're falsely feeding fuel to the wrong arguments, which then carries forward animosity and passive aggressiveness and really becomes dangerous to getting anything accomplished.
Talk about the racial wealth gap in America. It's alive and well right in the heart of the student loan debt problem. African Americans borrow more money to go to school, borrow more money while they're in school, have a harder time paying when they get out. The single
I don't see
that
that.
President
I
Biden
see
could do
completely
all by
the
himself
opposite
to help
in
close
action.
The black-white wealth gap for people with student loan debt, he could close it by 27 points. Cancel $50,000 in student loan debt. Same thing for Latinos. This would be a huge difference.
But in so many words, he has said that this is bigger than him. And you're saying that he does have the power.
He has the power. Be big.
So why doesn't this stuff get done? If you
I
look
am.
at the polling, the individual ideas from the Democratic Party, your party, are very popular.
I'm just waiting for
Then
her
you
to
look at
finish it.
Democrats, and often they are not popular. So what's going on here?
Look, part of it is we have a lot of ideas. And we're out there fighting for different pieces of this. Why is Build Back Better so big? It's because basically the train leaves the station only one time a year using reconciliation, where you can get a vote of 50. You can't put things like voting rights on it, but you can put all the economic package together.
But right now, the train's not leaving the station at all.
And you are right on that point. So we're going to have to rearrange, in fact, what goes on the train. But let me say this. Offer just a little bit of sympathy for the fact that what we're trying to do is we're trying to fight for everybody. We're trying to fight for our babies. We're trying to fight for our seniors. We're trying to fight for people with diabetes. We're trying to fight for people who need a government on their side. And yeah, we may have tried to load too much onto this train, but by God, I'd rather have people who are trying to fight for the American people out there trying to do it, instead of everybody hanging back and just saying, I tell you what, let's cut deals in the back room and make this thing move smoothly.
Senator Warren, thank you so much for fielding our questions, and thank you for the passion. Thank you for continuing to fight. All right, now it's time to check your local weather. It is 8:10. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Lynn.
We are in for
It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.